Hello my friends, my name's Carpo, and this video is my thank you to the Grateful Dead. Those who are Deadheads understand, and those who aren't won't, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to put forward a video just trying to express as best I can what an important part the Grateful Dead have played in my life. And when I went to the concert the other day, Dead and Company, I didn't know what to expect really, with John Mayer playing in Jerry's place. But the songs were the same. The songs resonate with my soul. Those lyrics, the feeling behind the music, and the dedication to the music is something that I just fell in love with the minute I found the Grateful Dead. A little story, when I was about 15 years old. Back then, my friends and I were into heavy metal. I'd gone through just about every type of music you could imagine, but at the time I was really into like Rat and Wasp, as well as things like MC Hammer, through the late 80s and into the early 90s. Then I got into Pantera and some other metal. And then my buddy showed up one time, we were about 15, and he says, "Hey, I got this tape from my friend, and it was the Grateful Dead, American Beauty." And our first impression was the Grateful Dead. This is what the older guys listen to. This must be awesome. And we turn it on, and Box of Rain comes on. That song is so mellow, and it was acoustics, and we almost laughed. We did laugh, but we're like, what is this? This is not what I expected. But for some reason, we fell in love with it. And it was a little while later, after I'd heard a couple of their studio albums, that I remember I went to Fred Meyer with my mom, and I got her to buy me a tape. And I picked out the Grateful Dead, and I bought Live Without a Net, 2 cassette, and I got into the car and I put it in the tape player, and I think I almost blushed. I was like embarrassed. I was expecting it to be like Studio Dead stuff, but it was full-blown 80s, like Feel Like a Stranger, just the total 80s Dead, and I'd never heard that before. I'd never heard Live Dead at that point, and I was kind of turned off by it, but then something about it just pulled me in. And I started listening to it. So it was about 92 when I went to my first show. It was at Autzen Stadium in Eugene. And we went for, I think it was either 2 or 3 days. Just a mind-blowing experience. I met so many great people, and I found my home, so to speak. And then through 93, I couldn't get a ride to Shoreline. I hitchhiked down there by myself. At like 16, it was just, I had to get down there. I drove to Shoreline with my Volkswagen bus, because I bought a bus at the time. And then the next year I went to Shoreline, but I hitchhiked. I hitchhiked the year before my bus, then I got my bus running, then I drove down. Sorry. Hey man, they were Dead shows, what can I say? So then in, I think it was 93 or 94, they came and played another 3 shows in Autzen Stadium. And then I drove up and saw them in Seattle, and at this point I'd gotten to about, 8 shows or something, and I was just loving this. Right in the middle of this whole thing. Then 95 comes, we go to see them at Portland Meadows, the first time they'd ever come to Portland. I was like, whoa, just hot, dusty ass show, and we all took too much acid and just had a really great time, but it was an experience, just say that. And then it was like, 2 or 3 shows later, and then all of a sudden Jerry's dead, and, it's back then all the people who hated the Grateful Dead, they really played on that, making jokes about Jerry, and, for those who were the Deadheads, it was a very moving experience. It's not losing an idol, it's not losing a leader, it's losing a representative that Jerry Garcia carried an air about him that said, I'm not political, I'm not here to tell you what to do, I just want to play my music, and I hope you like it. He was a very humble man. And the entire band, from the time Bob Weir, when I think he was 16 when they started this whole thing, and the whole Haight-Ashbury scene was built upon these bands that played this psychedelic music, the LSD movement. And those who don't listen to the Dead think that it's a drug culture. It's not about that. It's so much more than that. Taking psychedelics is something that brings people together and gives them understanding, but it's not about just getting high at a show. The music is what moves you, and the music is something that's very special. It's something that you can't define with any standard way of thinking, as far as something going on out there. You can't define it along the lines of an actual type of music or a band. Like, you go to see a concert today, and you know the music, and so you go to see the band, you hear the music, everybody goes home. It's like each person's there to see the band. You can all connect on the musical level, but pretty much you're not there to meet people, you're there to see the show. And many festivals are this way too. People are there to see music. But then there's the Burning Man culture, let's say, where people are actually there to meet and interact. And the Dead culture is very similar to that. And yes, Fish is very similar. And I know a lot of people resisted Fish, because Fish played completely different music than the Grateful Dead. But they had the same type of following. And it grew to the point where those who were Deadheads didn't want to listen to Fish after Jerry died, because they felt like it was somehow betraying the Grateful Dead, or that it was just jumping on the bandwagon like a lot of people did to follow somebody else. Because for a lot of people, following the Dead was a lifestyle that wasn't just about the music. There were people who just followed them around to sell drugs and sell shirts and merchandise, and that's how they made their money, and a lot of them weren't very nice people. But it doesn't matter, because there were millions who were. It's this way in every culture. There's a negative, connotation to everything. There's always a bad side to it. But generally, the people I met were good people that meant well. And I got to say, the psychedelic impact, it was a huge impact back then, because LSD being given out regularly. Jerry Garcia and the band back in the 60s. This was back when they when they met Robert Hunter, who wrote a lot of their music for them. And Robert Hunter was the one who came back and said, "Hey, I tried this thing called LSD. It was amazing." And next thing you know, they're all trying it, and they get into these acid tests, and they start playing these concerts for people who are on LSD. And it grew into a community of people who those drugs and that music and that lifestyle catalyzed a bond and an understanding about life. But the bond itself wasn't to the substances or the drugs. Many of these old Deadheads now are, in their 60s and 70s, and they're very, they're sober, they're functional, they have a lot going on in their own lives. People you would never expect. It would be like meeting Shulgin's wife, who Shulgin died a while back, but he was like the father of MDMA. He made all types of psychedelics, and if you see an interview with him and his wife, they just look like a normal old couple. You would never expect to be psychedelic users, but and it was the same way with a lot of the Deadheads these days. When I was at the show this past weekend, it was so much different than in '94. I mean, it's been 20 years, and the Deadheads were all either my age or a little bit older, and there was a time when I was laying on the field listening to Eyes of the World. It's a song, and there's a particular line where he says the seeds all burst into bloom and decay. And the picture I always get in my mind is that cycle of life. And I was laying sideways looking at these two little girls, must have been 3 and 5, playing with glow sticks, and then glancing out to all the people my age and then up to into their 70s, just dancing to the same music, being on that same level, looking at each other and smiling and feeling something wonderful, something beautiful, something that can't be expressed in words. And it's so much more than the music. I feel sorry for folks who don't have that type of community, because we yearn for it as humans, and I would urge people to find it anywhere they can. Because in my life, I've kind of wrestled between, should a person be codependent with others, need a group, and we are a group type, being. We enjoy being with groups. I mean, you can break it down and try to be scientific, or you can try to, make it seem like we don't need love, or, mechanize humanity, but it doesn't work, because everybody knows it doesn't work. Everybody knows they need love. You can pretend you don't, but you do. So I think the more we have, the more we can learn to embrace it. So I don't know. This is just some random thoughts I had and on the Grateful Dead, but mostly it was about the community of the Grateful Dead and what it did for me. The different phases of time when you listen to the early Dead and then into the 70s and you get into the disco and you hear Shakedown Street and then into the 80s, you know, and the 90s were just kind of the tail end of it, so there weren't really 90s Deads. It was pretty much 60s, 70s, 80s, but there were 90s songs, and then into the 2000s with Dead, now with Dead and Company, and before it was just the Dead, and they played with Further Festival and things like that. And a lot of people are very resistant, like, well, Jerry's gone, you know, the Dead are over. And I feel really sorry for those people, because Jerry would be ashamed, you know, to have people who won't go see the rest of the band because he's not there. Jerry wasn't that kind of person. He was so not egotistical. He knew it wasn't just him. It's the whole band that makes the music, and that's what makes it. So even though they're playing with new guys, and they're in there with this, you know, the O'Teal Burbridge is the bassist. He plays like a 6-string bass. The guy's just amazing. I mean, he adds a whole new dimension with some really low notes and really holds down a solid beat that Phil Lesh can't hold down anymore. Phil's good, but he's old, and he's having, you know, it's just what happens. You get old, you know. It's not offensive to him or anything. He's still a damn good bassist, but also it was just having O'Teal in there as a bassist, and then having, you know, having John as filling Jerry's place. I felt kind of weird about it. Like, I'm not a big blues fan, but I thought that John Mayer did a phenomenal job at not trying to replicate Jerry, doing his own thing, yet still being humble and kind of sticking around and doing his thing. Like, you know, when I saw him last year for the Farewell tour, we drove down to San Fran, and the show was amazing, but Trey played with them from Fish, and a lot of people were like, oh no, you know, I won't see that, it's Trey, you know, why would they ask him to play? And I think it was a perfect choice. Trey's a great guitarist, and after being a Fish fan, which to me I was resistant too, it took me like 4 or 5 years to even listen to Fish, until my brother in like 98 or 99 brought home a double cassette of a live one from Fish. I listened to it and it just blew my mind. I was like, these guys are amazing. What have I been missing? You know, and it wasn't too long after that then they broke up, and then, you know, they've been on reunion tours. So it's about embracing these bands that move you for the community, and I think there's more of this going to happen in the future with the festival scene and with certain jam bands. Who knows who will be the next one? Of course, there's other bands, Widespread Panic, and a lot of string bands like String Cheese Incident. I personally am not a big bluegrass fan, and I'm not into those bands as much. I don't enjoy Widespread Panic as much. I do like a band, Papadocio, which has really caught on, and I love STS9, and go to see Dark Star Orchestra, which is a Dead cover band, and they are amazing. I mean, they play an entire show. They pick a particular date, and then they tell you what the show is later. And they do a really good job. So, you know, I feel sorry for the folks out there who are like snotty, like the reviewers, the kind of people who are like, oh, this show sucked or that show was good. You know, you go to a show, and if you like it, you like it. You know, it's like food, tasting food. Everybody's got their own tastes, you know. And then once again, I'll quote that I mentioned the other day, which is that art is what we use to fill space, and music is what we use to fill time. And that's how you fill space-time. Music is something that you can listen to with your ears and bring you to a certain time in your life, just like a smell can. And it's amazing. Music is just amazing. I love it. Still amazes me that there's some people who don't like music. I don't know how you could not possibly not like music. But there are folks out there like that. But anyway, many props to the Grateful Dead for all that they've brought to this world. A lot of people out there who are really thankful for what they've done for all their fans, as well as allowing their people to sell things in the lot. You know, they really changed a lot of business ethics their business model has been followed more than a few times, of letting people sell their own products without trying to bust them for copyright, and allowing people to freely trade their music as bootlegs without trying to restrict that. And by that, it makes the fans want to contribute more. And a lot of businesses are taking on that model, let people have things for free, and then they'll want to contribute and help you out. So anyway, talk to y'all later, and